I know, again, SLA resin, you can make pretty much anything as crystal clear as you want, but
Well, kinda. There is still post-processing involved, even with resin clear. It's not just, oh look, it comes out like crystal. Um, Usually during the final curing process, and then of course pulling supports off, you are going to end up with a little bit of like a haze.
yeah.
So one of the ways to cheat is you can literally, coat it with a very thin layer of UV resin and then cure that, and you'll get the nice smooth surface. Or you just hit it with a couple of coats, like a decent build lacquer, and that'll fill in the slight surface imperfections, and you'll get a fairly clear part. Sometimes if you don't orient it correctly and you have supports where you want it to be clear, you're going down the full wet sanding path.
Well, I was gonna say at the last hour the clock strikes 12. You can always go and wet sand, especially with resin.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's your safe haven. But we know the time and energy that takes. And,
Oh, wet sanding. Oh, weeks and
yeah,
weeks of your life that you'll never get back.
yes, and for what, right?
Yep. Like, ooh, I'm all the way up to 8,000 grit now. 2 more steps to go.
Exactly. You're trying to get to that 12, 14,000 grit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it ain't gonna fly. But bigger stuff. But you just said the major issue is
So,
it depends on your orientation. That's kind of the
mm-hmm.
key. What is again, this is FDM, but you're
Yeah.
going XY, right? Or are you worried about the Z? And it seems like it's probably, well, you don't have XY, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming you would rather deal with the pixels density rather than the physical machine, screw layer
Yeah.
height.
So, yes. So you are going to want to orient the part that you're not going to see your every individual layer line on the z-axis. I
Yeah.
would much rather have a little bit of voxeling because of my XY pixel size, parallel layers every 50 microns.
And you just said it right there. Whatever that layer height minimum that you can go down to, that's the distortion that you're going to get.
Yep. So somewhat along the same vein, a very, very good deep dive I just threw into chat. The article is on the off gassing during the resin process. It actually also talks a little bit about FDM. FDM, you're really more concerned about microplastics. But with resin, you actually have VOCs being emitted. Like this goes into a really thorough dive. Like it compares the printing process to the washing process to the curing process, what chemicals are really released during what stage. It's this is the best written article that I have seen, the most comprehensive, I guess would be the word I want to use.
Yeah, it's just quite in depth.
Yeah. Yeah, it is by no means light reading.
Yeah, most of that stuff is now when you're getting into the certain toxicity
Yeah, but
standards and
this
stuff like
like
that.
so one of the big things, I see every new person with resin. I'm concerned about the smell. It doesn't matter if it's stinky or not. That's not the dangerous part. The fact that there is an odor means there is enough in the air that you're being exposed to the nasty stuff. If you get rid of the smell, you may not be getting rid of the nasty stuff. You just won't know you're still being exposed. Like one of the chemicals that it off gases is formaldehyde. Not in high.
No, but
So over a long period of time, that's not good to be exposed to. You can ask, medical examiners and morticians what long-term exposure to that stuff does. Is not great.
What really
But
impresses me here is
mhm.
the particle number, concentration per square centimeter, per cube
Uh-huh.
centimeter. I could understand, the printing and the washing. I'm surprised how low it is for the printing. And I'm kind of surprised how high it is for the washing, but at the same time, you're actually, using
Well,
down.
I
But
was going to say you're
the
using
curing
a
to me is,
salt. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, the washing part, I mean, most of us are using a solvent that evaporates at room temperature.
Exactly.
So that's why the load in the air is so much significantly higher. Now, oddly enough, there is a guy on I want to say it's the Lychee Discord server. Apparently, the guy's father is a like buku high up chemist, mainly dealing with solvents. Like, oh, really, sir? And so, needless to say, he has been talking with him regarding, a finding a solvent that is safer to handle, but preferably one that it's much easier to precipitate out the resin that ends up, dissolved in it. So you can get more uses out of it. You know, even if it's more expensive at the front end, if it lasts 8 times longer, it doesn't matter. It'll even out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but then the curing process dry before they chuck it in the curing machine. So you're using the UV light and it's kind of speeding up the evaporation of the isopropyl alcohol. But then, I mean, that's the point where you're truly getting the full cure of your part. Now, I guarantee you that they're cooking it under the UV light in this study long enough to actually fully cure the resin. Most people like, oh, I put it in my curing station for 2 minutes.
No, no, no.
How thick was this part, and is it clear resin? If it's clear, that may legitimately be long enough. If it's gray, that is not long enough.
Yeah, a navy blue, a black, no way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they also seem to think, well, oh, I can over cure it and it'll be more brittle. I mean, no, no, no. That's just the natural fully cured properties of the resin that you're using. That means
Exactly.
you're using cheap resin.
Yeah,
If you don't
exactly.
want that, go to spend $5 to $10 more per bottle, and you'll get a much better result with the finished cured piece.
Well, then just read the bottle, right? Look at the hardness scale of what you're actually buying.
Yes.
Don't just say, "Oh, I like it because it's a pretty color and it's under my budget."
Uh
That's
huh.
you're gonna get
Yeah.
you're gonna have those properties. But on that
Yep.
chart, exactly what you're saying, I am kind of blown away that the curing is at the highest. I get the wash,
Mm-hmm.
you're bringing everything out, but the curing,
Yeah.
you're actually baking that, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
physically through
Yeah.
photons breaking those
Yep.
off, and that's what's leaving back those original
Mm-hmm.
properties.
So the other thing to think of during the printing portion is, remember, where is it curing? It's
Yeah,
curing submerged in liquid.
yeah, you got the bed on top, you got the liquid.
Yeah, so I mean, for it to off gas, it would, and then start off gassing from the liquid itself. So it's not just off gassing right in the air during the cure process. It's going to have to, dissolve into the liquid and then come out of the solution into the air. That's going to
Yeah.
be a much slower process than you're cooking it and it's directly in the air. Now, of course, to get around that, you could water cure, which actually is a thing, especially if you're using clear resins. as long as they're not water washable. You
Yeah,
do that and you're
that's
gonna have a bad day.
yeah, yeah.
But
That's the big thing.
so one of the big things with a clear resin, I'm not so much sure that this really happens with FDM, but it's yellowing. So as you're exposing it to ultraviolet light, the clear is going to yellow a little bit from that UV exposure. And that is due to oxygen being able to come in contact with the resin during the curing process. It actually oxidizes a layer on the outside of the model. So if you're printing clear and you cure it inside of water, you're creating a barrier between the part and the oxygen, so you will not get that oxidation layer. The part will not yellow. Now, depending on which resin that you are using, the other thing you can do, so for instance, Tech Blue, that's one of their technical resins. And it's BLU, it's the name. It's not just the color blue. It is a translucent resin. One of their recommended steps, so after you fully cure it, you actually pretty much bake it. You get it up to about 60 Celsius. So, just about, let me think, 60 C.
Well, it's about two. I'm sorry, about like 130 ish.
Yeah, a little bit over 100 Fahrenheit, right around there. And you bake it for about 10 minutes or so. And I'm not sure on the chemical process that's going on, but I think that actually helps break down that oxidation layer and turns the part clear again.
Hmm. Yeah, I can. Well, maybe because it's doing it so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of
Because
a
there's
slow
Yeah,
cure.
because there's a couple of technical resins that I've been made aware of that basically recommend after you're done curing it to bake it off for some period of time.
Now, is there any other post processing outside of that?
Mm-mm.
Besides just cleaning it first and then having it.
No, so the biggest thing, and you will notice this more with a clear part than with a opaque part, is so I do a two-stage wash. I have a bucket of really, really filthy resin IPA. I take the part off the build plate. It goes and basically gets kind of swished around for maybe 5-10 seconds by hand in that. That is purely to get most of the liquid resin off of the part.
Okay.
If it's a hollow part, I will submerge it a couple of times until the color of the liquid coming out of the hollow is the same color as what's in the bucket. Then I pull the supports off of the model. I then put it in my washing station, which is much, much cleaner isopropyl alcohol. Actually, I'm going to be switching over to using denatured alcohol because I can get it a hell of a lot cheaper than IPA.
Yeah, I got questions on that for you too.
Yeah, I can get a 5-gallon container. 4 gallons of IPA will cost me about $70.
You were breaking up for the 5 gallon.
So it's
how much is the 5 gallon again?
$50. Yeah, 5 gallons of denatured alcohol and like one of those metal 5-gallon jugs from Menards is $50.
Yeah, so you're almost saving half there. Well, about 30% or so.
Yeah, I'm saving a significant portion and getting more by volume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the quote unquote clean bath. I'll throw a part in there.
Or what percentage is that at? What do you like the dirty stuff to be at, and what is the clean stuff that you like?
So
to keep at
the dirty,
but
yeah, I mean, so the dirty, literally, like I will let that get to the point where when I pull the model out from dunking, I'm not seeing anything sloughing off. Like basically, that's going to get fully saturated.
Yeah.
And then I'll go off and try to get some of that resin out of it. The final wash, the second stage, that one I don't let get near as dirty. When I pull something out of that, if it's shiny or sticky, it's time to filter that or change that solvent out.
And that makes sense. Hey, Brian, how are you, man? Might be. Oh, you're muted.
Yep, yep. The good old Zoom mute.
The good old Zoom mute. I probably change that,
Screen.
but just in case,
Yeah.
it's a good idea
Yep.
to not.
Yep. Yeah. So once I take it out of that bath, which I'll usually, and it depends on the size of the part, and if it's hollow, how long I'll let the washing station run. I do have one of those like washing.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. Um, 2 to 3 minutes in most cases. And then so if it's a hollowed part and I go to pull it out of that and I see any discoloration still coming out, back in it goes for longer. Um, so once that is done, I'll do a final once over, looking at it to see if I see, is there any difference in sheen in like crevices where maybe there's still a little bit of resin that's still stuck in a crevice. I'll hit it with a spray bottle of pure, virgin isopropyl alcohol. And then it sits and it completely air dries. Once it is completely dry, you do a once over to see if you see any sort of a sheen or any sort of like a white crusty residue. Both of those would be, hey, you still have some dirty IPA that evaporated off. There's still some resin there. Go take care of that before you cure it, because once you cure it, it's a lot harder to fix. I paint 99% of the stuff I print. So if there's a little bit of white residue, but it's not enough to cause a textural difference, I don't care because I'm covering it with primer. If it is a clear part that I want to be truly clear, fix that before you cure the part, by all means.
And that's why I was curious, because this is what Kirk was having me do with resin. Again, I should get back into it, but only so much time, and I don't really want to play with all that stuff. That first initial mix can be like 20% IPA.
Yep.
You don't need it much. You just, the whole point is you're going to let it sit in there. You're going to let it soak. It's going to get super, super dirty. It's going to get so dirty that you could eventually go and sit that bucket outside for like 2 days in a hot summer day, and that thing is going to turn into a solid brick of plastic.
Yes, it will turn into pudding. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you have that second to go and wash off the junk, and maybe that's at like a 40% or something, and that's just kind of like a quick dip. Maybe you brush some stuff off, you swash it around and that. And then exactly what you just said, now you do your final where you have 90, 95% IPA, and you just lightly spray it on there to get that final cure or final clean of what you want. So, okay. So that's, because I have a great amount of this stuff. That's why I was asking of 80% IPA alcohol. Then I'm never going to go through it. So I'm just trying to think like, okay, is that good enough to go and sell?
I was going to say, so if you have a large quantity of like 80% IPA, so this is what you need to do. Do you have any sort of a relatively clear container of let's say a gallon or bigger?
Yes.
Okay. So you can dry that IPA to separate the water out of it to get it to be a more pure isopropyl alcohol.
Thank you. Okay, so there is a way to do that. Okay.
Yes, there is.
Okay,
so
please continue.
Yes, so drying alcohol is a thing. You can actually, there are YouTube videos on it. The biggest thing is you can't do this trying to increase the proof of a alcohol that you're going to drink. Hands down, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
So with isopropyl alcohol, it's 80% IPA, 20% water. In most cases, it's reverse osmosis water. There's no minerals and nothing else in this. So what do? Mix in table salt.
Oh,
Shake
okay.
the
You
ever
broke up.
living.
You broke up just a hair out of there, but so just all you got to add is table salt.
So mix in some standard Morton's table salt.
Okay.
Shake the ever living shit out of it to make sure it dissolves completely,
Yep.
and let it sit. The salt water, because the salt is going to bond to the water molecules,
Yep.
is heavier than the isopropyl alcohol. So after letting it sit for a few days, you're going to have a cloudy layer of salt water at the bottom of your container.
Yep.
Siphon off the isopropyl alcohol from the top, and you're done.
Interesting. So
Yep.
that and it makes perfect sense. The salt water is going to be dense. Alcohol is going to sit on top.
Yep.
It's going to bond down there. What do you think the increase? Because there's no way to test it, is there? There's no way to over the counter, kind of do a test to say, hey, this is 91%
So
IPA
so
now.
yes, actually there is, because the content of water left in it is going to change the specific
Ooh.
density of the liquid. So they have, and it's oddly enough that the guys who distill alcohol use it. It's the exact same thing. Now, mind you, so there are two different. Oh hell, what's the name of I can't think of the name of the tool. So it looks kind of like a thermometer, and you fill a graduated cylinder with your isopropyl alcohol you want to test. You drop this thing in, and basically how high it floats determines what the percentage of alcohol is.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't know the name of that either.
I can't think of the name of the thing.
I
Now
know.
there are two variations of that. One is for spirits, and one is for like a beer. You have to
Yes.
use the one that's designed for hard spirits, for distilled liquor.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't even know how to
Yeah,
search
but
it. It's like yeah.
any brewing shop is going to have that, let alone get it off of Amazon or wherever, and they're cheap.
Yeah.
But my guess is you could probably get it to somewhere around 95%. You might be able to get it a little bit better than that, but you should easily be able to get it from 80% to like 95.
Yeah, that's a nice way to do it. That's a very simple way. And like you said, it's going to take about a week. Let it sit for 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
Siphon it off.
And it
Let the
will
other
be
stuff
a
sit.
very visible layer separation. The only thing is, when you go to siphon off the IPA, when you go to put the tube in, be as gentle as you
Oh,
can
of
so you
course.
don't disturb it and mix anything.
Yeah, don't
That's the
tip it over
only
and try and dump
thing.
it
Yep.
out.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing would be, well, if you do this during winter, just leave the shit sit outside, and if you get a cold night, the water is going to freeze on the bottom, and ta-da, it should stay separated. I mean, it'd have to get fairly cold
Actually,
because
yeah, yeah, because the
salt
alcohol.
water, well, because
Yeah,
the salt water has a much lower freezing temperature.
yeah,
The
it's probably
problem is, if you were to put it into like a freezer, it's not going to have enough time to separate out of solution
exactly.
before it starts to freeze.
Yeah, maybe in its later stages, don't disturb it, and then put it in like a fridge. Put it
Yeah.
outside for a day. Or
Yep.
put it in a dark area in your garage or something for the day. Let it settle, and then you go put it in the fridge. Right? Obviously, don't disturb it. But yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
and that's a very because I was thinking about how can I increase this to like that
Mm-hmm.
95, 98%. I have no idea
Yeah.
how to do a testing, but you just said it for again the water is going to bond with the salt. That's a super easy fix.
Mhm.
Use the ionized, nice Morton salt. Use whatever best version of
Whatever. I
that
mean,
is.
honestly, you could probably just get standard good old rock salt. The only problem that I would have with rock salt is there's going to be other trace junk in it. Whereas
Yes,
with table salt, there is nothing else in it because it's food grade.
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, like
and
if
I
you
don't.
were to get the salt that they put into water softeners, that should also be a pure salt. So if you have a water softener for your house anyways, you can use a little bit of that and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, yeah. I think the table salt is a better idea.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's easy, readily available. It's probably cheap. I get a water softener is going to be it's cheap too, if not cheaper. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how dense. I'm sorry, not how dense. How much broken up those are compared to table salt. Again,
They're
how
so
much do
they're
you
they're
want to sit there and
definitely
shake it?
bigger. Yes, exactly. The water softener is going to be larger flakes,
Yeah,
hands down. The table salt is going to dissolve the easiest. I mean, if you really wanted to be lazy, you could chuck the table salt in there and put it on a magnetic stirring plate and just let it sit for a while.
Well, again, for having the body shop, I was just gonna go and basically take a bottle and make sure it stays nice and tight on the paint shaker, and just let that sucker shake for like 5 minutes, and be like, all right, cool, and then just go and let it sit
Yeah,
in the
that
cooler
that
for two
that'll do
days.
it too. I mean, either that or the mixing bit that normally chuck into a drill for like mixing up a 5 gallon bucket of paint or mud.
Yeah, yeah, that's another way to
Yeah,
do it too.
yeah. Whichever way you go, and the better you get it dissolved, the more water is going to come out of it in separation. But yeah, it's super simple. So in getting the resin out of the isopropyl alcohol, you can use alum powder. It's aluminum. Oh crap! Aluminum what? Aluminum sulfate, maybe?
I was just gonna say sulfate, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's aluminum sulfate. It has to be the pure aluminum. It cannot be the alum powder that has the magnesium mixed into it. But the resin will bond with the alum powder, and then it will precipitate. It'll fall to the bottom. To dissolve the alum powder, you need to dissolve it into water, and then you're adding some water into your isopropyl alcohol. So one of the big things people said, no, that's terrible. It's you're diluting your IPA. You're adding water to it. Well, if you do that and then you do the second step of drying it, yes, you're going to have a little bit more water left. Not going to argue that point, but it's immaterial. I can get a lot more uses out of this before it's done and doesn't work anymore than if I didn't go through the precipitate and drying process. I mean, yes, you can just let the IPA evaporate off, cure the sludge, throw it away. It's safe, perfectly fine. But this way you can get a lot more uses out of that same container of solvent.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I just found that link here. It's already in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're the one that told me that, but that's great. That's a heck of a way to. Yeah, that's definitely a heck of a way to do it. Hey, Brian, now you're back.
Mm-hmm.
You're off mute. How are you, man?
Good. Yeah, I was getting a weird Zoom message. It said the host is not allowing you to unmute. I've never seen that message before. So I don't know, but it seemed to be unmuted, so I don't know.
I did like the thing where you ask somebody to like unmute themselves, but I didn't know why it didn't turn on your video or audio.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But
That's weird.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, more Zoom stuff. But I found, I'm gonna have to try this for sure. Because I'll tell you at a later date, but I have an ungodly amount of alcohol.
Oh, do you have like multiple 55-gallon drums or?
Not that much, but I bet if you dumped all the bottles out, there would be Well, I just did the math. There's easy. Yeah, there's easy 55 gallons of rum. Easy,
Oh,
maybe two.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And again, I'm not going to use it all. There's no way in
Mm-hmm.
God's I'm going to go through that. So I'm like, all right, I either increase the percentage and make it a little more
Yep.
worthwhile, or
Yep.
I actually just take a box and go and sell it on eBay for $20 or something. I don't know, and see if anybody
Yeah.
buys it. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's no way. It was too good of a deal. There's just no way I'm going to go
Mm-hmm.
through, however many countless bottles,
Yep.
liter
Yeah.
bottles that I
So
have.
yeah, so doing the salting process, the other thing that lets us do is like, oh, if they have a stupid low price sale on 70% rubbing alcohol at, Walgreens, CVS, whatever your pharmacy is,
Exactly.
go buy a ton of that stuff and then suck the water out, dry it, and ta-da, it's perfectly usable. Because otherwise that the 70% just it does not cut the resin well enough. There's too much water.
I've noticed that it's more slimy because the alcohol kind of
Yep.
is sticking with the
Yep.
water molecules, and it doesn't evaporate off. It's more
Yep.
dense.
Yes. Which that is the one reason why. So the spray bottle that I use to do a final spray off of anything, I am always going to use 99% IPA for that. I will never try any other solvent. I'm not going to do anything that I've dried. Like I will buy 99% IPA for that spray bottle because one, you don't use hardly any of it out of the spray bottle at a time. So it should
Yeah,
last a really long time, but I don't want anything else in that because literally anything else is going to give me residue.
we know what they
Yeah.
sell it in the 5 gallon, $200 from Viewline. Dang near. Yeah, that's a little pricey.
So you can get 4 gallons of 99% IPA off of Amazon from a lab in Florida for like $72, I think its current price.
Oh, it's
Nope,
not
nope,
bad.
$70. There we go.
Oh, right here.
Yep, right there.
Yeah, that's pretty good. There's like what 3.78 liters in a gallon. So you're getting four. So you're getting 15 liters basically. That's a pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good deal. Whoops, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I could buy 4 gallons of that, and that will probably last me a year or more just
Yeah,
using it in the spray bottle.
yeah, and you had probably a little bit finer mist as well. Instead of
Yep.
like a traditional, just like water bottle, spray bottle, kind of thing.
Yep.
I'm sure you have a little smaller
Yep.
one for smaller orifices.
Yeah, actually, the last set of 4 gallons that I bought came with 2 small spray bottles in the box.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I mean, so I'll say, it's 99% IPA. It does eat the rubber inside of those spray bottles.
Of course it does.
Yep.
Yeah, you want to talk how fast those O-rings are going to go? Those suckers are.
Yes,
They will be
exactly.
gone.
Yes.
It will be gone
So
very quick.
yep. So needless to say, I'm a bottle, but I have gone through several spray heads.
I would absolutely believe that.
Yep.
Not to go back to but before you walked in, Brian, I just want to show you again the link. I think I put it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat again for you. The transparent prints for FDM.
Oh, I saw a link in there, but I didn't click it.
Okay. It's on the screen right now, but if you recall,
Yeah.
Again, it was a Prusa video, or so. I know you've done them for like the lights on, your like a cosplay arm and stuff like that for having the buttons on the back shine through. But basically what I recall from doing, again, it was either Prusa video or it was somewhere else on how to print FDM transparent to look like glass, and it was print very hot, print very slow, and print very fat layer lines. And that's exactly what they were saying here. So those are the highlights at the bottom, but it was essentially use a higher hot end temperature, try to have as low of infill as possible so that light can, go right through. And then
Yeah.
also, have a taller layer height. And then again, it does depend on what your orientation is. Like what you were saying, Chris, you're probably better off to have, more, I don't know why it's not going there. You're probably better off to have FDM is a little bit different. But I guess if it's a core XY, you're better off to rely on the Z height rather than the X or the Y just for that that regular movement. Whereas in resin, you want it to focus more on the XY coordinates rather than your Z height dimension, because that's what's going to be limited and fixed. So you try to orient things, more so in the, Z axis on FDM and an XY on like a resin, and you should get, pretty quality, lines. 25% slower, thicker lines, fatter nozzle, and then use even more of a flow rate.
Yeah, the setting changes that you use for like a clear resin are, one, you're going to use much less exposure time because the UV light can get a lot deeper into the resin. If you're using an Anycubic printer, you can actually adjust the power output of the light source. The Chi2 box based printers don't honor that setting, even though it's in the file format, from what I've been told. I swear it actually works on my off-brand Yitimu. I need to test it on my new Jupiter to see. But by turning down the UV power, you can have a little bit longer exposure. But because it's not such an intense light output, it's not going to what they call bloom, which means so think of it as you're throwing light through a window. And if that light is too bright, you're actually going to throw light a little bit offside the edges of that opening. So you're going to be curing resin outside of the area you actually want to. So your parts are, one, going to lose some detail, and two, be larger dimensionally than what you intend them to be. So if this is a dimensional accurate part that needs to fit, you're going to have a bad day if you just try to randomly print in a transparent resin.
Yeah, that's not the part for a fit finish like that.
Yes, well, I mean, you can get it to be dimensionally accurate. You'll have to get your exposures dialed in, and then you're going to have to figure out what your dimensional inaccuracy is and compensate for that before you slice the file. So if you, let's say, you can print off a couple of test parts, like, okay, I got a 2mm cube, a 4, a 5. Okay, how far off are they from what the spec should be? Okay, that is the percentage that I need to reduce my part size on that axis to end up with the finished dimension that I want.
Okay, that makes sense. It just
I just all my clear stuff I've just printed right at the same defaults I would any other color. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to try that. Higher temperature and thicker walls. And there's even said turn the fans off.
Yeah, shut your
again, so because that would mean that your prior layer is probably still going to be hot enough to where it's going to, rather than just bond surface to surface, it's going to more melt into the previous layer. Yeah, so you have a contiguous wall versus all these layers that are kind of bonded to each other.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I didn't slow my speeds down either. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try that.
Same thing for the flow rate too. You're just shoving more in there, which
Yeah.
is
Yep.
naturally giving you a, X micro or nanometer worth of, taller or thicker wall there. So, that might actually help too. I know it's not much, but I've noticed, where was I doing this at? What was the part? Oh, when I'm doing like a surface area, like on the chips and stuff. How I get the chips so glossy and flat is I have my Z offset again on triple F on FDM, just slightly lower, so it squishes more into the glass bed. Obviously, it's glass, so it's going to be a little bit, more shiny. But I'll also make sure that the overlap is like 105, 107%. So it really squishes into each other on each side. And you can't see the layer lines at all. Like there's no layer lines on the top. It looks like a molded piece of plastic.
So it's basically ironing the previous layer on every pass. That makes sense.
Basically, yeah. Now you can see it on the top layer, how overlapped it is because there's no pressure there in relation to the glass bed on that fresh heat. But it's kind of the same principles there as you go up your walls. And it makes sense. You don't want really thin walls because you have more, I don't know how to define this, but you have more potential exits for the light to refract from, right? At 10th of a millimeter high walls, there's technically 20 different lines that the light bounces through. But if you have a 1.5 millimeter times 10, you only have, 14 lines where that can bounce through. So it gives the appearance of being more transparent. It might not look as good, but it depends on what you're looking at. Are you looking at the actual finish, or do you need this to be a clear piece of glass?
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of that's going to be what the organic shape is. If you're trying to print a sphere, a much taller layer height is, yes, you're definitely going to see it. If you're printing something that's more of a lens that has a flat surface for its main surface, you're probably not going to notice that. It will be very optically clear.
And looking at the filaments too, I have noticed when you said on the Anycubics you can change the light intensity. I know that's a setting on the one that I have. Again, range from 0 to 100%. So you can definitely drop it down.
Yeah. So 80% UV power is what's basically recommended for running opaque resins.
Okay.
And again, that's to reduce light bleed. If you run that thing wide open at 100%, you're going to have bloom and light bleed even with an opaque resin. So 80% is what we really typically recommend. And the quality control of these things isn't the greatest. So it's possible you might get one that's, a lot hotter of a light source, or one that, doesn't put out as much. And that's like, okay, what exposure times are accurate for you? Okay, go ahead and bump that UV power up to bring these exposure times a little bit down. But with a clear resin, you want to drop that down to like 60 or 65% of the power output.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So significant drop.
Yeah, I was running everything just at 100. So that's a good, I wonder why certain things it seemed like they would hard too quick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not too quick. Like what does blooming actually look like on a part?
Hold on a minute. I have an article for this that shows a amazing view of it.
You said 60 to 65 for transparent, right?
Yep. All right, where is it? Here we go. So one of the other ways to combat that is with a setting that's called light off delay. And
Yes.
that literally is what it sounds like. After the resin, after it exposes the layer, it waits before it then moves the
Oh
build plate.
my goodness.
Yeah,
That's
so
exactly how my stuff was looking.
yes, so light off delay will definitely help that. Turning down the UV power will help as well. But basically, so when it does its cure, the light off delay, gives it that little bit of extra time to get to it from its green curing state to its cured state before you pull it off of the FEP.
It basically allows that existing resin to roll off and
It lets
kind of
it
be a protective layer against what just cured.
well it lets it fully bond to the layer before it. Whereas otherwise, if it's still really green, when you go to peel that off of the FEP, you may have a little bit of a delamination, a little bit of layer separation just at the very edges, which of course is the part you're going to see.
Very interesting. And I've had these issues as I'm looking at them and reading through this. These are the issues that I was having. I was just not, having
These
proper...
are the issues that every person has, that the manufacturers are shit at explaining. These are the things you should tune.
Okay, so these are the things in the same analogy for, again, as Brian well knows, and myself, FDM stuff. They don't tell you, what to look for when the bed is off level, right?
Yep.
The resin printers don't tell you what to look like when, hey, adjust your light carrying time or adjust your, again, for FDM, there's a your Z, end stops and stuff like that, your offsets and things, your jerk and acceleration and things like that. These are not common.
Retract speed, retract amount. Yeah. I mean, it's like these are things that none of the manufacturers tell you anything about. And
in defense, it is in the resin or it is in the material too, right? A crappy TPU is going to be, worse performing and a different retraction, tension than, a high quality TPU or a certain hardness or something. I'm sure same thing goes for, again, like you said, certain high quality resins are going to cure more consistently than something else.
Yes. So, well, just like, so if you're printing a very, very flexible resin, like if you're printing 100% Ceriatec tenacious, that stuff is like TPU when it is cured. It is very flexible. That stuff is gonna behave much differently in your vat than a normal resin because one, it's a lot more viscous. So you're going to have to allow a lot longer time for it to flow back in between layers. So you're going to want to add quite a bit of light off delay. So your resin can definitely flow all the way in so you don't have any cavitation before it kicks off that next layer of exposure. And so there's right there is the perfect screenshot. Between half a second to 1 full second of light off delay is all you need in 90% of circumstances.
Okay.
So I mean, so let's say you're printing a part and you have, let's say, 2,000 layers. Okay, you're adding 2,000 seconds. In the grand scheme of things, that's probably a 9-hour print anyways. So it is a negligible amount of time you're adding to the quality you're getting out of the piece without having to do any post-processing work.
Yeah, in that example, if it's a 2,000 layer print and you're adding an additional second, it's 2,000 seconds, as you just said. Let's assume that it's a 9-hour print, right? 2,000 times 10, push it 20,000. Okay, fine. You're only saving I'm sorry, you're only adding an additional roughly half an hour. So I would absolutely sacrifice 30
Exactly.
additional minutes
Yes.
for that quality. Of course.
Yes, 100%, because that's machine time. That's not me doing labor to make the part look like that.
Exactly. That's machine time. That's not me time. I could be
Yes.
sleeping and
Yes, 100%.
yeah, that's 100% chance I'm picking the longer exposure time. Or, I'm sorry,
Yep.
reducing my light exposure and having a delay in there, or whatever like that. Same thing for printing at a higher quality. I'm fine to go and drop the resolution down and print a little bit slower if I know that that's what the customer wants. Again, that's machine time, not me time.
Correct. Now, so one thing to note. So Elegoo brand resin printers will not honor the light off delay in the software unless you also have two-stage motion control turned on. It's just how the firmware works. You don't actually have to use two different speeds in the two-stage motion, but both things must be toggled to the on position for it to use the light off delay value.
So what is the feature that you need on then? And what is that?
So there's two separate features. One is literally called light off delay, and then you just set that numeric value. The other one is called two-stage motion control, TSMC.
Okay.
So what that is the movement of the Z-axis in the printer. So the first 2 millimeters of movement as you're peeling up off of the FEP, that's where 90% of the separation is going to be the part peeling off.
Just like in this screenshot, that bottom right there.
So you want that to be relatively slow. So one, you won't have a layer adhesion problem if you have a large surface area. You're not going to have a layer separate. You're going to have a much better surface finish because you're not going to have the chance of the edges delaminating as it peels. However, you don't need to have it go really, really slow the full distance it needs to lift to completely separate the part from the FEP. Because, again, the FEP is going to stretch and it's going to separate from the outer edges in towards the center. Because it's going to flex up in the middle as it peels and then snap back down. Okay. So two-stage motion control lets you say for the first 2 millimeters, I want you to move at 60 millimeters a minute. So 1 millimeter a second. For the other 4 millimeters of lift height, for a smaller printer, you want to be right around 5 millimeters of total lift height. Bigger size screens, you do need more lift height. My Jupiter needs 8, for example. But for the rest of my lift height, go ahead and go 180 millimeters a minute. That's perfectly fine. So that way you're not wasting all of that time with that slow movement speed. You're moving slow where you have to have it move slow and speeding up where you can to save some print time, and you'll have no difference in print quality.
Yeah, it seems definitely worth it. Obviously, as you said, that's only a chit-two box issue that I'm looking at right now. Nobody else really has that.
Lychee Slicer also has both of those features.
Lychee does. Okay.
Yep. I don't know about the other ones. Up until yesterday, I didn't know that you could use Cura Slicer to do resin slicing. That just blew my mind.
Yeah, because of the whatever the new resin is that they've had for a year now or 2 years.
Okay. But I mean, really, if you're doing consumer level resin printing, you're using either Chi2 Box or Lychee. Those are the only two out there that really have any substantial market penetration.
Yeah.
There's a couple but for instance, a Formlabs, you don't need to deal with this because they handle all that shit in firmware. They do it for you.
Yeah, you're already paying for that anyway.
You're paying for that, and if you're using their resin, they know all of the exposure settings for it because it's a closed ecosystem.
Exactly, and that's why you're paying $150 for a bottle of resin, because you're going to get that tight tolerance because they've paid the engineers to do the testing in relation to the firmware.
Yes, and that's why their auto supports are amazing, because they know the exact material strength of the resin.
and again, not to get off topic in that sense, but Brian, we've talked about this. We brought it up here before too. I know it's more expensive. I understand that. That's the ultimate cost right there. But that is what you receive. That high quality product. That's why people buy a Cadillac instead. Well, that's a bad example. That's why people go and buy Bentleys. I don't even want to say Rolls Royce, because Rolls Royce is a piece of shit. I'll pay for that one. After 3 or 5 years. That's why you go and buy a Bentley or a Mercedes rather than a 6-year Ford Fusion. 6-year-old Ford Fusion or something like that. I was going to say Toyota Camry, but those things were rock solid. So God bless Toyota. You go and buy the higher quality Perusas instead of going to buy an Ender 3. Not to say that there's nothing bad for a beginner getting an Ender 3, but if you're now serious with printing and you're actually in a printing business for customers, you're going to have a heck of an easier time, with a higher quality piece than that. So I hate to be that person, but man, it's always better to buy the nice tools, if you can, than play around in upgrades and calibrations on the crappier machines. Because that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the engineer team to know exactly all the settings that you were going to do with that medium.
Well, I mean, and especially it's like if you know the material strength of the resin you're working with, the software can very easily do the math to go, how much support do I need? That at that point, that's pure math. That is easily solvable.
Yes, exactly. That's very simple. You run a quick script and it's done.
Yep. That's why auto supports, suck on the consumer side, because there's just so much variation. You can't account for that in software. Yeah. So there is, so using calibration parts to get to a known strength, you can trust things that are professionally pre-supported. So using the Amerilabs Town like you have on the screen, or using the cones of calibration from Table Flip Foundry, the cones is much more a pass-fail. There's more things that you can look at on a town that will tell you different things about how the resin and printer are behaving versus the cones is purely a material strength test of, are you exposing enough for supports of this size to hold? The towns, like the checkerboard at the bottom of it, that lets you see, do you have an issue with how far away from zero your build plate is when it homes? If you're too close, those will be squished.
Yeah, if you look, under exposure, look how, there's no gap, because you couldn't build that layer, where as you get closer and closer, see how tight all of that is,
Correct. The corners will be blown out. They'll be very much rounded. But so like you'll be missing the entire bottom row of open boxes if your build plate is way too close to zero in the home position.
Of course, because you won't have that base. Squish. They'll be gone.
Correct. It will physically squish. And so that is a telltale that this part will give you, whereas some of the other calibration prints don't. The problem is, one, this thing is absolutely freaking tiny when you actually go to print it. So you better have good vision or a decent camera. And two, it is very subjective. You have to have seen a lot of these to know the telltales to look for. So for example, if you look at one of those, right above where the checkerboard stops, those thin gaps. So if you look on either edge of those, the very edge of where those like the rectangular are sticking up, you'll notice that the corner pieces are blown out. They are missing.
Here, like where my
Yes.
cursor is, like those
Yes.
corners, like there's a gap
Exactly.
there.
That
no
right
gap
there, correct. The one above that, that is under exposure.
And that, yeah, right there.
Yes. So those are like, you have to know which features on this test to look at for what things. And that's where it is so subjective. It's very hard to say, hey, go run this part and you'll be good. It ends up being, hey, go run this part, wash it, let it dry, do not cure it, and take some pictures of these angles and post them, and we'll diagnose your print.
Yeah, because if you see
Right.
between, you know, exactly what you're saying, your checkerboard at the bottom, that looks pretty good. You know, maybe no corners are touching here, but this one looks nice because these corners are touching, but you can tell it's small. But this gap is filled in the corners. This one is not. This fin is straight. This one is, you know, slightly bent. And then here you have a nice gap from, you know, 100 microns all the way down to 10 microns. But here, that 10th micron is filled up, and you can't even read the numbers. So
now,
you know, that's a very fine line to me between under and over exposure.
Correct. And the other thing is whether or not that one line is actually going to print well, that's going to depend on the size of the pixels on your screen. If you're running a large format but a older printer that, let's say it's a 10-inch 2K screen, some of these features literally will not print because the printer isn't capable of printing them.
And it just goes down. It's just not a dense enough pixel screen.
Correct. The pixel's too big.
Yeah.
So it is highly subjective, whereas there are some other ones out that are it is a pass fail. If it looks like this, you're good. If it doesn't, if it looks like this, you're too exposed, lower your exposure and print again. If it looks this way, you're underexposed, you need to add exposure, print again, rinse and repeat until you get this is what a success looks like.
What are some other printing? Where's it at there? Yeah. What are some other printing calibration parts?
So cones of calibration is one of those really easy pass fails. There's another one that is really good that has a lot of different features. It is made by 3DRS and they call it Starship. The only thing I don't like about that one is it's rather big.
Oh, so it does take a while then.
Yeah, it's more vertical height. The 3DRS print, like this one, it uses 17 milliliters of resin. It takes on a mono printer about an hour to print.
Okay.
Not and bad. Like if you look, click on that one. So there is a success side and a fail side. The cone that has the marking on it on the top and the bottom, that's the one that really matters. The other ones are basically there for structural purposes and to give you a gauge of how far over or underexposed you are. The little piece in between those two cones on the top and the bottom is a support. It is the diameter of a specific size support. So as it's printing, it needs to be strong enough to hold that entire upper cone until that roof prints.
Okay.
So the roof is there.
Got it. Okay.
The roof is there. So in case it does fail, the roof is there. It will pick that up off the FEP so you won't have anything left stuck to the bottom of the FEP you have to clear out. So it is self-cleaning in that regard. So that is, it is purely a pass-fail. Ideally, you don't want any of the upper cones to complete on the failure side and all of the cones to complete on the success side.
Yeah, you can see how thin that is.
Yeah,
No.
it's what is it, 0.28 millimeters,
Yeah,
I think.
see how thin that is versus
Yeah.
how thick those are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this is a very easy, like, oh yeah, if you have cones printing fully on the fail side, drop your exposure. If you have cones failing on the success side, add exposure. Rinse and repeat. You can tell this, to somebody once, or just let them read something that short and sweet, and they can go off and do that on their own without any training on how to read the part.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try this on the Anycubic.
Now, so two things of note. One, this calibration part does not work well for really, really low material strength resins.
Okay.
So something as super flexible as a Soriatec Tenacious, this is not the test for you. There are a handful of other, so like Z Mud is the one that comes to mind. It is a very, very soft resin. Doesn't work well with this because the material strength is so low. But if you're using a Soriatec or a Anycubic resin or an Elegoo resin, all of those this is going to work fantastic with.
Right there, again, that comes down to what quality of medium are you using?
Correct. Now, in some cases, you might really, really want that soft resin. That's okay. You just have to understand you're going to have to do special things to accommodate that difference in strength. The other really good calibration print, and it should be on Thingiverse, 3D RS, and then put a space and type in the word Starship.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted there. It's probably, tell me which one. I'm sure it's going to be one of these. I've seen it before.
No, it's not that.
No.
I wanted to say it was 3DRS.
We'll get rid of that and see what pops up there.
Yep.
This one?
That one.
Yeah, there. Oh, okay.
So,
I've seen this one before too. Yeah.
Yep. So this one is a little bit taller vertically, and it does use more resin.
Wow.
However, because of the different strength tests that it has in there, like it has the pillars, it has a bunch of basically the same thing as the top cone, a small support holding up something bigger, and then a arch on top of that. So if one of them does fail, the archway will pull it off the FEP later on in the print. This will work for resins that have a lower material strength because there are more features on it that you can look at to determine, am I exposed enough? Am I underexposed? But again, there's a little bit more of subjectivity with a part like this. And I mean, that's honestly, that's the point of this. You're testing multiple features of the resin versus a pure, material strength. The only ones that I will tell people stay, run away from are the flat validation prints that are like 10 layers thick. Like the big one that everyone prints is the XP2 validation print. The problem with a flat print is twofold. One, if you are printing more base, more bottom layers than what that part calls for, you're going to be printing some of that at your bottom layer exposure, which means it's going to look ridiculously overexposed. The second problem of that flat validation print is it doesn't simulate a support at all in any way, shape, or form.
It's things like these.
Yes. Yes, those are absolutely terrible. No one should ever print them. They will not tell you anything ever.
I was going to say, it seems like there's not enough room to tell you anything.
Correct.
In the Z.
Correct. That is the exact point.
I mean,
But
I see
people
why
like
people
printing
do that.
them because it takes 15 minutes.
Yeah, if that.
But so for instance, like the inside of that infinity sign is supposed to come to a perfect point between the positive and the negative side. If it's mushed together, then you know, oh, I'm overexposed. Well, if you're running more than the 4 bottom layers that part calls for, and no, they don't tell you that anywhere on the part, you just have to know this. You're going to have bottom layers that are into the feature part of that print. Well, yes, it's going to be ridiculously overexposed because your burn-in layers are going to be like 20 to 35 seconds when your normal layer is like 3. Of course it's going to be overexposed.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that, oh, I have to keep dropping my exposure. Why do my things fail? Why do I only get supports and nothing else? Well, this is why.
Yeah. So don't use those. Use more. Yeah. Use some more depth.
Yes. Anything that simulates a support, you're not going to have a horrible time with. Some of them are easier to read than others, but no matter what, you're going to get a good simulation of the actual type of things you're going to print.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're printing business cards flat to the plate, a flat test is going to do nothing for you.
Yeah, I don't think you really want to do resin business cards. At that point, you're better off to laser at your CNC,
yeah, I mean, or print
like
a single resin master and make a silicone mold and mold them. Yes.
Well, actually,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, I thought that was fascinating. I kept bouncing back and forth there.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about making molds and stuff like that before, and you just said that. I did not realize that. I know it's not their whole manufacturing process, right? They got way too much money into molds and all that. But the fact that somebody like Pepsi can do exactly what you just said, instead of me 3D printing these bottles, that sounds really cool and futuristic. Why don't I go and use the old dumb manufacturing way, but just turn out the molds every 30 days instead of every 5 years on a bottle, right? We can do new designs, so on and so forth, so much quicker.
Yep.
And it's so much cheaper. If it breaks, hey, not a problem. It's good for 1,000. It's good for 1,000 bottles or something before it starts to, get a little weary, and not a problem. Go and print some more, swap it out, put the new one in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so as long as that mold can last as long as whatever the shortest duration servicing that has to happen on that production line is, you're not losing any production line time for a change out.
No.
That's all it's got to last. So, if you stop the line every 24 to 36 hours to do some maintenance on something else, as long as that stop time is long enough to change that mold out, you're not losing any run time on your line by going to this way. And you get all of those benefits of not having to have a mold machined for like $100,000.
Oh, right there, they said they spent $10,000 to produce one, tool set. And if they're not going down by 96%, then that means that they can do these things for $400, right?
Yep.
So you go from $10,000 to $400.
And I'm willing to bet that's doing a powder bed fusion.
Probably.
That would be my guess. They might be even doing it and then doing the sintering after the fact. I don't know. If they're using
It could
Like
actually be a hard plastic. It might not have to be.
I was going to say if they're using the why can I not think of the name of the plastic now? Altem, like Altem, that shit is ridiculously strong. At that point, I think it would hold up to molding pretty well, anyways. And they're basically vacuum forming into those things. I mean, it's not like it's really taking that much of a pressure. It's just holding the exterior shape as they, you know, drop the plastic in and suck it to the outside edge.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Those probably last for quite a while, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah, it's like what you've done, many times, Brian. You're doing right now in your project. You go and you do your rough, mock-up on the printer, and then you just go and make a mold of that through, vacuum forming, and then now you got a silicon, mold that all you gotta do is dump whatever you're using and you just keep turning.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go, right there. So they're prototyping on one thing, but their final piece is printing in PEEK.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean that right there, like, yeah, that's just, it's a relatively robust filament. There you go.
Yeah. Do you want to use stainless steel in your mold, or do you want to use PEK? Right. I'll use PEEK all day long, for a cost basis.
Mm-hmm.
You can recycle and all that stuff. Yeah, right there. Exactly. $10,000 to $350. You can throw away 10 of those molds.
Yep.
And you're still 60%, cost savings, right? You're
only and okay, so hold on. So those molds they're doing more than 10,000 bottles before they need to replace that mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty that's amazing. I'm surprised it lasts that long.
So Kurt told me this, and Brian, I actually we definitely all need to get together, but more specifically, the reason why, again, I miss you guys, want to hang out with you guys. I want to meet you in person, Chris, but I want to take because I have more honey badger products to get out. And Kurt told me that, he goes, Max, instead of selling these things and doing a print, do your one-off, do a limited run of like 100. That's one of 100 3D prints or whatever. But everything else, just take the schematic and just make a mold out of it, and then pour your plastic in there and call it a day. Your cost is going to go from the print time material. I got these weigh 90 grams, and my print time is basically 10 hours. Okay, so at $3 an hour in printing, for all that stuff. It's 10% of a roll, so it's $3 in plastic, and it's $30 in print time, at the retail side, right? That's $33 for a decorative piece. I can drop that cost down to $3 or $5 per unit if I do a mold. Now, you're going to have the 3D printed layer lines there. It's not going to be as defined just from what the mold is. Maybe not.
I mean, if you go through the little bit of extra post processing and smooth the surface.
Yeah.
So I mean, like if this is an FDM part, I mean, go through the process, acetone smooth it.
Actually, that's not a bad way to do it. Just take that because you're going to make it into a mold, so you're better off to spend.
Spend that little bit of time on the front end on your master, and then there you go. So just like so for example, one of the things that everyone wants to print with a resin printer that is a horrible idea because it's so finicky is printing a set of dice. So like for role playing, you'll have your 6-sided, your 8, your 10, your 12, and your 20-sided die. Getting them to actually be the correct shape without stretching or warping, you have to really know what you're doing with supports. It is not something that auto supports will ever get you success with. Usually you'll have a little bit of post-processing after the fact anyways. So the best way to do it is print your one master set. If it takes you 8 tries to get the one perfect one, okay, fine. make a silicone mold, and pour the rest of them.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, what have you printed lately, Brian? That you've done a mold on? Have you printed
Well-
your that silicon mold that you want to make yet?
yeah. Have you
No,
done the
I
eagle yet?
haven't. Yeah, I haven't. I still keep. I spent another 4 hours last weekend working on the Mustang, and I got another mod I got to do this weekend. But I
Let's
need
go.
to get to it.
Mm.
I need to get to it and get it done.
No. Drive that Mustang while it's summer because you're not going to be driving it. When there's 2
Yeah.
inches of snow on the ground. So
Mhm.
take your time and enjoy it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't drive it all last year, and I only drove it like once the year before. But yeah, I've been driving it pretty much every day for the last 6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
I figured out my tail light issue actually 2 days ago. The damn
Bad ground.
it was up. The plug was upside down.
Oh no.
Okay, the fact
Yep.
that you can plug it in backwards is just
Yeah,
wrong. That's an
that's a
engineering
problem.
failure.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I replaced, the whole back end, the taillights, the housings, the lenses,
Oh.
and the right side was upside down.
Oh man.
Yeah, it worked, but it was brake lights were triggering the tail light. The tail light was, vice versa.
My goodness. Oh my goodness.
And it was just one of those things. I took it apart 3 or 4 times over the last several weeks. Couldn't figure it out. And the other day, I'm like, I just don't think those contacts are right.
Mhm.
And I pushed them out to where I could hold the bulb onto it,
Mhm.
myself. And I started turning the bulb, and sure enough, I'm like, it's not wired wrong. It's just upside down.
Oh.
So I turned
Yeah,
it
you
90
think that-
degrees, stuck it in, and it's working perfect now.
Yeah, you think they would have at least put a stop, in the
Yeah.
in the
Yep.
mold, right? When you would go and plug it in,
Yep.
like, hey, this clearly doesn't go upside down. Like,
Yep.
okay, great. I see the teeth or the keyhole or whatever is in there.
Yep. Like all you need is an alignment
Yeah.
pin. This is
It
not difficult.
It
Yeah.
has a little alignment, key,
Yeah.
but there's
Mhm.
one top and bottom. So how do you really know? It's not like one little notch. There was 2.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's something where it's like you just make one of the conductor pins slightly out of alignment, and
something.
then I mean, that's all you got to do, and then it physically won't fit the other way.
Yep. But yeah, it's been bugging me
but
for
what you just-
several weeks.
Well, we just said it right there. Pepsi, they're spending 10,000 for one of the molds, and I'm sure they got 1,000 molds, right? How much extra money was that for them to go and make a different,
Yeah.
angle on
Slightly
on the
different,
180,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
Exactly. Oh, it was an extra 25,000 for a 1 millimeter notch, right? It's like we can save that.
Yep.
We'll
Yeah,
save
I mean,
that a
at
little bit.
this point, they can change their bottle types much more at a whim, and they're paying at least one person's full-time salary for this to be able to print these things on demand.
Yeah.
And they're still saving money.
But yeah, I'm hoping to get to that again this weekend, and because it won't take long. I just got to get motivated, get out there and get it done.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping the heat wave that we've been having kind of breaks a little bit, because I haven't been motivated really to print anything in the last week or so, just because like I don't want to go out there to start the print, let alone to process it when it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that post processing in a hot garage or
Yeah, I mean, like this is like misery. I don't want this.
yeah, that's different. Yeah, that's a different different complain in 50-degree weather versus 90-degree weather versus zero. I'll
Yep.
be like, oh, my prints aren't even curing because it's so cold. It's like, oh,
Well,
okay.
see, I have the heated vat, so it can be zero in the garage, and that printer
you're
will
fine.
be happily and just go right along printing. Which I don't know if I mentioned this. So I've seen two now printers, consumer price points, selling with heated vats.
I remember you saying that
The
it was pretty
yeah,
a
so
pretty
the
significant amount.
yeah, so the Piopoli Forge is the first one that I'm aware of. I can't remember the brand name of the other one, but it's currently still in early testing stages. They're not out to market yet. But the Piopoli Forge, they're using the 100-watt heating element, which is the same thing I'm using on mine. It's basically a heating element that's wrapped around the outside of the vat. That's really all you need. You can use a bang bang thermostat. It does not need to be PID, because honestly, with bang bang, you're going to have about a 1 degree Celsius swing. It's going to go up or down half a degree Celsius from whatever your set point is. That is plenty tight enough a tolerance, considering you're heating a liquid. It has thermal mass. So there are some, you can just put a heating element and heat the enclosed space. Yes, that works to a point.
No, but it's not the same because you have
It's
that direct
not as
contact.
efficient. Yes, exactly. It's not as efficient as directly heating the thing you want to be warm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't put it. Yeah, don't put it in a little, with a fan, grow tent kind of thing.
Yep.
Because you're just wasting all that extra heat. You're better off to have it physically touching the vat and therefore conducting that said heat.
Yeah, and so a lot of the vats nowadays are plastic. For instance, my Yitimu is a aluminum machined vat. The Jupiter is also a aluminum vat. I think the Jupiter literally is for rigidity things because of the size of it. But so both of those printers that I have are all aluminum chassis. It is a giant aluminum heat sink. And I have no problems that resin staying up to temp with the garage being below freezing.
So it's similar to what I'm looking at on the screen. I understand this is more like that, but again, the Anycubic that I have as well. Again, you got an aluminum bed, you got aluminum frame vat. You can just throw all the heat on there, and it will again disperse accordingly.
Yeah. Now, I mean, so again, because my two printers are all aluminum chassis, so they're a giant heat sink. They're going to pull some of that heat away. They are going to warm up above ambient. Whoop-de-doo. The 100-watt element that I'm using has more than enough juice to keep the resin at the temp that I care about. And it takes about 20 minutes for it to bring the resin up to temp in the winter. If it's really cold out, maybe half an hour or so. But, I go out there, the first thing I do is, turn the heater on, and then I get my silicone spatula, and then I, mix my resin up in case it's settled any from sitting in the vat. And that, that's maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7, depending on how long it's been sitting since my last print. And then I go back inside for like 15 to 20 minutes and then come back out and start my print.
Yeah, let it get a little warm and you're good to go.
Because once it is printing, you're getting a fair bit of heat off the light source and the fact that the reaction itself is exothermic.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that heating the vat gets you is you won't have any temperature shifts. Because if you have a 5-degree drop in the middle of your print, you're gone from my exposure settings are correct to they're not enough and you're going to have a failed print in the middle, or at best a horrible layer line. So it's just one of those things of like, this is a quality of life improvement that they hadn't been able to include in the printer up until last year when the patent had finally expired. So, and it's a heating element. This is like $5 in material cost. This is nothing.
Of course, how expensive, are those thermistors, right? Everything's freaking open source or standardized at that point. You can
Yeah,
get
I mean,
so
I
20 bucks.
yeah, so I mean, you could get away with using what they call a brewer's band, which is designed for keeping your, keg of brewing beer at like 80 something Fahrenheit. I wanted to be able to go above that because some of the Tech resins like it at like 35 Celsius.
Yeah.
So the brewer's belt will work for most people, and you don't have to deal with a thermostat. It's all built right in. It's just got a bimetal switch basically inside the thing. So I went with a commercial heat tape that's really designed for keeping, large pipes from freezing, and then a $15 Inkbird thermostat. So I mean, my all in for parts is probably right around $100, but that's buying off the shelf things versus buying, components at component level pricing.
Yeah.
So I think any resin printer over the, let's say, $300 price point in the next 12 months is going to have a heated vat. I guarantee it.
I would believe it. I think, again, it's kind of the, FDM things that we talked about last week on the bamboo, product. Like there's certain standards that everybody has to now go to. Corex wires are getting cheaper, meaning not, they've always been cheap in that sense, but the blank blueprint in a similar sense as like a Marlin, and obviously Ender took that, is now being more readily available. Everybody's going to be shipping with a camera. Everybody's going to be shipping with Wi-Fi. That whole 9 yards, and then let alone AI get involved. Same thing for the resin stuff. You will have a heated vat. You will have a much more sophisticated and complex, VOC remover, filtration system, so on and so forth. Better light exposure, carrying, and light off switch, so on and so forth. So, but it seems like, again, it takes a little bit longer than that. It takes a little bit longer than the per cycle. I almost said per year, but it's not. It's definitely not per year. The per cycle machine improvement, meaning Ender 3 comes out 6 months later. The Ender S1 comes out, and then the Ender S1 Pro comes out 3 months later after that. Right? It's just constant small improvement iterations, and eventually, in technically 18 months at Model 4, right? Not 2 years, but it's already on the 4th version. It's improved in these certain ways. I think you're 100% right. You're going to see these areas in resin improve. Do you need like Octoprint on resin for anything? I'm not talking about just monitoring your print. I'm saying like utilizing AI to say, hey, this happened, go and make an adjustment. Or is there just not that much viewing?
So there really aren't enough data points.
That's kind of what I was thinking. There's just not enough points on there.
There's not enough to do really any analytics. One of the things that one of the projects is working on is actually a force sensor built into the Z-axis arm, and basically that would be looking at peel forces. You could probably start doing some stuff with that, but so much has to be done optically looking at a resin print to determine what you need to do. And for the first hour of your print, you can't see it because the vat is in the way anyways. There's really no, you're not getting anything out of it. Now, using Octoprint to avoid having to walk to the printer with a thumb drive, that is a thing that you can do on some of the printers. Unfortunately, with the latest T2 box, their encrypted file type, the guy who wrote the plugin for Octoprint will not integrate their SDK in because it's not open source. It would violate the licensing for the plugin.
Makes perfect sense.
And
Yeah.
Exactly. And it can't fault the person. Now, supposedly, Chi2 has a board releasing sometime in the next year that will allow remote print management for putting a file out to the printer and then starting the print. There is a AnyCubic cloud for some of their new printers where you can do that. You can push a file to the printer and start the print remotely. And their AnyCubic, I think it's the M3 Plus and the Max, have a webcam built, that comes in them, so you can kind of view the print as it's going. Honestly, the only use case I could see for that would be doing resin time lapses.
Yeah.
Because again, you're not going to know if anything's wrong until an hour into that print. And at that point, well, okay, that one failed.
Yeah. And that was kind of my point. Yeah, it's cool for a time lapse for aesthetics, and hey, I'm away at the office. I just want to check on my print.
Yep.
What analytics can I get from a resin print simply through optics? And I don't think there's that much outside.
I mean, the only thing you could get would be, do I have nothing on my build plate? That one you could do. And at that point, okay, stop the print, because, well, there's no point in continuing this shit show anymore. This one sailed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The other thing that's kind of lacking is any form of like farm management on the resin side of things.
Okay.
And that's something that I think in the next 12 to 18 months is going to resolve itself on the software side.
But to me, again, it comes down to, are you willing to throw Wi-Fi in there and then some basic, firmware and relation software to go
so
and
here's
connect
the funny
that stuff
thing.
over?
So Chi2 box boards have had a hard Ethernet port for like the last 3 years. The firmware just doesn't use it.
Yep.
The hardware is there. The newer AnyCubic printers have built-in wireless. They are Wi-Fi only, which but I want to plug in wire, because I might not have wireless out in the garage. Although, and then again, if you don't have wireless out there, you're not going to have a hard wire. But anyways, I want a hard wire. I don't want someone's microwave to cause me a problem as I'm sending my print file to my printer. That's not something I want to be a thing. And with the size of some resin print files, if you're doing a big job, you, especially on a higher resolution screen, you might be sending a 500 or 600 meg print file. Because remember, a resin print file, each however thick your layer is whatever resolution your screen is an image. Yes, they compress a little bit, but not that much. So you can easily get a multi-hundred meg print file for a big print that's covering most of your build volume. It's nothing like the G-code file that you send to an FDM printer, where those things are freaking tiny.
Yeah, it's all just movements, right? It's X, Y, Z. It's just pure character bytes, times how many lines, versus you're actually sending an image file over, and pixel density really matters. The more pixels, the heavier the file. Yeah.
So that's one of the constraints on the resin side, which why I think it hasn't gone to remote print management sooner, just because of the the overhead of dealing with moving a file and something like that on the microcontroller itself, that is quite a bit to ask.
Yeah.
Because those things, there's not any spare power on those things. they're as bare bones as they can get them.
That just shows you how early we are in all this stuff too, right? They're not building it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that, and I think ARM is starting to get to the point where they can make very, very powerful processing units for these stupid cheap. So they're going to be adding more functionality to them without having to really raise the manufacturing cost of the controller boards.
Just all in scaling at the end of the day. That's, you know.
Exactly. So, one other thing I want to mention. Oh, so speaking about the Bamboo X1, so people have started receiving their production units.
Okay.
There has been some reports, not a lot of people, although I don't know number of people compared to how many people have actually received said unit. There's been some issues with shipping. The biggest one seems to be, so inside the chassis of the Bamboo in the enclosure, there is a big ass parts cooling fan, a big blower duct. Apparently that's not as well secured to the outside of the chassis as it should be.
No.
Yeah, it's that people in where, yeah, it's come loose. So I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that means they didn't do as much engineering testing of it surviving shipping. That's a relatively easy manufacturing fix. You know, either change the number of or the size of that fastener.
Exactly. That's a cheap Chinese roundabout way.
I mean, it's a super easy fix from an engineering standpoint. Either make the fastener bigger or add more of them. For the people that have already received their units, I'm like, well, you have a couple options. One, you can, see what the time frame is for an RMA. Option two is find an adhesive that will take the heat that enclosure can get up to and just glue the fucking duct to the side of the printer. Because honestly, it's a plastic duct. The fan is inserted not on the side facing the enclosure, so not to the outside wall. So it's not like you're ever going to have to remove this. Glue the sucker in place and be done. Problem solved.
Yeah, you bought the machine the first run. You don't expect it to be a perfect manufacturing process.
There are going to be teething issues.
Yeah.
As far as what problems could have happened, that one, that's nothing. It's the all of the axes are staying fine. Nothing else is getting damaged. The screen is perfectly fine. All of the mechanicals are good. The duct coming off, that's a first world problem. That's an easy fix.
Yeah, that's a quick, put some duct tape on it, or put some high temp glue in there, some God, why am I blanking on the two-part mix stuff? Anyway.
Two-part epoxy. Yeah.
Put some high temp two-part epoxy in. It's real simple. Put something like that. That's easy stuff. But if it's gonna hold up, again, if it's a core metal, chassis, obviously you have plastic sides or whatever. But if it's if aluminum chassis or preferably forged steel, I know it's more expensive. But core XY, is height. Some linear rods instead of just your regular. I'm sorry, your actual linear rods instead of your whatever the rails are instead of the linear rods. That's what I meant to say. That's fine. Those types of things, fantastic. But see how it runs in 6 months. But again, that's the thing with all this hardware stuff. We've already seen how phones work. We've already seen how computers work. in that sense.
Mhm.
You're turning and burning these things every 6 months. You're making the first model. You're shipping it out. I mean, that's at least what I'm learning. I'm taking mine. I have mine to
Mhm.
finish order and delivery. I'm already working on the Eden 2 SE version or something like that. You name whatever the improvement
Yeah.
is for that. You do a bulk run of this. The next one you do your improvements on. Like that's what I'm.
Mhm.
I guess that's what I'm learning. And clearly, everybody else in the world does it, right? You get the iPhone 12, and then you get the iPhone 12 SE, and then you get the iPhone 12 Pro, and then you get the iPhone 13, right?
Mhm.
It's just constant improvements along the way. So the second one's going to be out. Buy it at Christmas, get it, February or March.
Yep.
The next one is, they're going to release it in May. It's going to be same. The third one's going to be released in May. Or I'm sorry, pre-orders in May, delivery in August, September. So you got 3 of them out in a year, right?
Mhm.
It seems that's how the game goes. You get paid to improve. And those small things, again, that fan, the duct, whatever, that's nothing. If you're getting persistent, inconsistent bed leveling because your fasteners are not square.
Mhm.
Okay, now that's an
Yeah.
engineering problem. All right, that's
Yep.
a recall on all the machines. But see how they
Mhm.
perform.
Yep.
I shared this, Brian.
I'm definitely. I think I'm gonna hold off until maybe October, November. I think time frame, and then see what people that are receiving their units then are saying, and that's probably about the time I'm gonna decide whether I'm gonna jump in on that or go something else.
Yeah. And it's relatively cheap, it's $500 or whatever it was, $600. Or how much? I don't know how much was it.
I'm gonna be going if I jump in on it. I'm gonna go with the X1 Carbon with the material changer on the top. So all in, I think it's 1,400.
Okay, so
It's
so
still
to me, right there,
it's still cheaper than a Prusa XL. So
correct. But in that same vein, and again, everybody has their own hobbies. We're definitely different. You're coming to a meetup. We all have machines. We make money on them, or we do things outside. To me, that's still an expensive unit at $1,500. And I understand, a brand new phone out of the box, you buy it cash outright. It's $1,500, $2,000 for top of the line phone. Everything is across that board. You can thank money printing for that. But at the very least, you still have those really cheap machines that are $199 or $99, and it's a bare bones Ender 3, of which that lowest bar continues to keep rising. But if you're paying $1,000 or $2,000 for a 3D printer, to me, you're at least serious enough to attempt to get your money back, whether that's in entertainment or whether that's in production use.
100%, yes.
Again, if you're making an average of 75,000 a year, an extra $2,000 to go and spend. I know it doesn't sound like much, but that's a weekly paycheck right there. So, if you're willing to go and risk a weekly paycheck on a piece of hardware, okay, it's a different conversation now. Not everybody's going to go and do that instead of churning and burning 4 Ender 3s and making $500 in upgrades on all 5 of them or something like that for under $1,000, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like that's like the price range. Again, you go and buy a brand new Pixel or a brand new iPhone or whatever else. It's basically $1,000. If you want the top of the line phone, it's $1,000. Now, again, people, do they pay per month on that and stuff. You can go do that through a firm or other, platforms like that. I've been thinking about doing, or I already have an account for them, but actually, marketing, for that. But that's kind of the thing. Go and spend $2,000. I mean, Brian, what'd you buy your Taz for? Right?
Yeah,
I know Taz's is still
2,400 initially. Too much.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly for what it is. But
Yeah.
It's American made, and the company's still around in that sense. I understand they charge for service, like but you're spending $1,000, $2,000 for a nice piece of equipment, no matter how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted
Yeah,
to show this.
the
Go
plain
ahead.
X the plain X1 without the material changer, I want to say is right around, I think, like the $650 price point.
Okay, so you could utilize
It's not
filament
bad.
swap, instead of doing a color change, and
Mhm.
it'll just take more time. Pause your G code, but yeah, that's not bad.
Mhm.
That brand new Ender 5, Brian, that was what, 300, 400. Those S1s that
Yeah.
I have, I need to start selling those. They were 400. So it's kind of right in that range. And again, Core XY is better, just for what it is.
Mhm.
I had a friend build a Voron,
Mm.
and he had not a lot of trouble, but he had a lot of questions for what somebody else when they built theirs, and they also built a second
Mhm.
one. So again, that's what I like about Vorons. They're everything is open source. They don't manufacture really anything except for the designs, and then they give it to you in like an open source kit. They do a nice BOM for you, and a few other things in that relation, where to source it
Mhm.
from. But it's all custom built, yourself. But again, it's Core XY, and those are the machines that you see, a benchy get printed at a centimeter a second, right? Heat
Yeah.
sinks are heat sinks are 8 inches long on each one of the steppers. It's like, oh my gosh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm curious what people are going to do in the next 2 years. Hey, I
Yeah.
can print in 30 minutes on this thing, not 4 hours.
Mhm. Yeah, the only thing with
Mhm.
the Voron, well, two things. One, you either have to have another printer all ready to print the stuff, or you just have to buy all the printed pieces.
Yes.
But I'm going to spend multiple hours putting this thing together and hope to God I did it all correctly so it works, versus I am buying a tool to make me money. Two
Exactly.
very, very different populations for a customer base.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I just had it on the screen. Brian,
Mhm.
you're driving your Mustang and stuff. We know all about,
Yeah.
classic cars. Do you want to build your dream car, or are you just trying to get to work and back? Right.
Yep.
Two
I did
completely different markets.
3D print a couple of wire clips to hide the wires in the trunk.
Nice.
Nice. That's when I brought this up. I saw that, I know it's 10 o'clock, but I saw this on here, and I wanted to ask you, did you do anything for your Mustang that you could, share or notice quite easily? Or is it stuff like the, clips for the wiring, that
Yeah,
are
I
kind of
the
hidden
only, the
away?
only thing I 3D printed was some, took like 22 minutes to print 3 clips, and they just kind of fit in the wheel wells to move the wires out of the way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, but it was just something. It's like I don't want to just leave the wires hanging.
Yeah.
It's like I want to tuck them out of the way, and I thought I'll just
So
go make a clip real quick.
mhm. So one of the things that I plan on doing once I do get an FDM printer, so I have a 97 Mitsubishi Eclipse. It's the all-wheel drive turbocharged variant.
Nice.
So one of the things I've done quite a bit to the motor. It is nowhere near stock anymore. But I want to go to coil on plug for the ignition.
Mm-hmm.
There is one company that makes the bracket that will hold the coil on plugs, except they mill it out of a billet aluminum, and it's like $200 for this bracket. I'm like, this isn't a structural piece.
Yeah.
I don't need it to be billet aluminum.
Yeah, I had a
it's not a show.
spider.
It's not a show car, but
Mhm.
like I'm not gonna pop the hood to show off like, ooh, look, shiny motor. But like it needs to hold the coils. That's all it has to do.
Yeah.
So I will most likely be printing a bracket for that because like so I'm pushing about 400 horse to the crank.
Nice.
So a little bit
Oh
over
wow,
double
yeah.
stock.
See,
Yeah,
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 I was
yeah.
gonna say that
I
is
am
not stock
significantly
then.
no, I
Yeah.
am significantly past stock.
Yeah. You
Um,
saying I'm putting 400 to the crank, maybe whatever 330 to the wheels or something like that, or 300 to whatever you're getting. Yeah, that
yeah,
is
yeah, but
not stock.
it is
I like it.
no, it is not stock. But I'm basically at the point where I've hit the limits of the factory ignition system. Going to coil on plug would let me do some more tweaking and maybe do a ethanol mix to drop my combustion temps down. Because that's the
Yeah,
beauty of
that'd be.
E85. It burns cooler, so you can make more
Yes, it
power.
does. Yeah. Running in something super hot. You're not running 93
Mhm.
or anything
Yeah.
that needs
Yep.
that hotter burn, that
Yeah.
higher
So
temp.
I replaced the computer in the car. And one of the cool things that their not stock firmware lets you do, there's some unused pins on the ECU. Well, I can take the flex fuel sensor out of a mid 2000s GM vehicle, hook it into my fuel system, wire it up to those two pins on the ECU, and I can go from running a tank full of 93 octane to mixing in E85, and it will on the fly change my fuel map
Wow, look at that. That's nice.
on a 97.
I was gonna say you're gonna be the weird one looking, or people will be looking at you like the weird one at the E85
Mm-hmm.
pump. Be like, I don't think you're supposed to be doing it. No, don't worry, it's fine. I know what I'm doing.
Yep. Like hear that noise? Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. You're gonna have to show them the E85 badge that you took off of like a Ford or a GM vehicle
Yeah.
back in the day when they were putting those on. Like, yeah, hey, you
Yeah.
probably saved. Well, I mean, I don't even know what E85 is right now, but I bet it's 50 cents cheaper.
Yeah, so yes, it's cheaper, but you don't get the mileage. You get
Oh, of
fewer
course
miles to
not.
the gallon.
Oh yeah, I know that for
The
a fact.
reason why you do it is purely for performance because it burns cooler.
Yeah,
That's definitely not a commuting vehicle. That's a hey, it's nice outside, fun vehicle to drive.
exactly.
Um, luckily when I redid the fuel system to put the bigger fuel pump and all that in, I did go with Viton lines. So the whole fuel system, return line and all, is 100%, E85 safe because that shit will eat the old fuel lines
Oh yes, it
and
will.
turn them into terrible, terrible goo.
Yeah, you want to wonder why you're not getting good flow and good fuel, injection.
Or even
Yeah, I
worse, why
see.
do I keep plugging injectors?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you don't want to
Did you
fill
have
that
a
up.
do you have a problem with the factory paint?
No, so
No.
my car was in Florida most of its life.
Okay.
So it's some like the leather on the seats. Oh my God, it's so sad. I really need to reupholster it. But no,
I
the
bet it's all
paint
cracked.
completely fine. There is one spot of rust that I've noticed that I need to get taken care of. So on the rear hatch, at the lowest point of the rear glass, like basically where the gap is in the factory weather gasket for that piece of glass, I have some rust right there. That is the only rust anywhere on that car.
Okay. So I had a spider and
Did you
factory
have
paint
issues with
job.
the front struts? at all by chance rusting out?
Um,
The pockets where the strut's mounted?
I had some work done
Okay.
on the front
Because that's
struts,
the,
but I don't
because,
know if it was the pocket. I don't think it
okay.
was the pocket. But
Okay.
I
Because
had a
the,
bad
mhm.
factory paint job,
Really?
and
Okay.
it just flaked and peeled, and
What color was it by chance?
it
I'm
was
curious.
black.
The black paint. Okay. Mine's white from the factory. Um, but the front strut towers is the really only known place of structural rust
Mhm.
that ever happens on those vehicles. So you just make sure to keep that good. You see some surface rust, you take care of it right away, and yeah, you'll never have a problem with it.
Yeah, it was a fun car. I liked it.
Oh, it is. Yes, that is amazing to drive. It's the road feel out of that thing,
Hmm.
especially with it being all-wheel drive. I mean, you eight point in a corner and hit the pedal, and it goes like it's on rails.
Yeah.
That's so that, and with what I currently have done to it, I can easily smoke a Camaro and most Corvettes unless the guy actually knows what he's doing.
Nice.
You got is it an automatic or a 5-speed? Because I know they
It
came in
is
5
a
and 6-speed.
so the turbocharged, so the GSX all-wheel drive only came in a stick. It
Ah,
was
boy,
not even a option to order with an automatic. Stick
let's
only.
go. Let's go.
Yes.
Bring back the manual gearbox. Goodness
Yep.
gracious.
Yeah, so the last time I took it for tires, I explicitly told the guy at the tire shop, this is not a stock vehicle. It is a stick. Please, for the love of all that is holy, do not put the green tech who doesn't know how to drive a stick in this car. He's like, hey, don't worry about it. My lead tech races an Impreza on the weekends. I'll have him pull the car in. Great.
Not
Yeah, the
convincing
lead
to
tech
me, but okay, fine. I'll play along.
the lead tech stalled the car twice getting it into the bay.
Exactly,
So he
because I don't
comes in
care
a
if he's
lot
racing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't know what
So
he's
he comes in
driving.
as yeah, so he comes into me, he's like, what the hell do you have in that car? I'm like, it's a stage 2 clutch. It's on or off. There is no middle. It's like, yeah, you're not kidding. I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was very clear about that.
Yeah, and people
It's
don't know
it's
that. They don't
about
know how to control that tight. It's not even so much
yeah,
power; it's just the sensitivity that you have.
it has 400% more holding power than the stock clutch.
There you go. So
Yeah,
yeah, you're
there
either
is
on or
no
off.
slip. Yes, on
Yeah,
or off.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah. Like when I was learning to drive the stick, we have Z4. My mom
Oh,
always had
okay.
but that was even before before that. But she's always had Volkswagen Beetles, some bugs. So the last bug we
Mm-hmm.
had was a gray '79, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
4-speed on the floor. You know that thing
Yeah.
you're going 60. You know the most that thing is going to go at 60 downhill. Okay, so
Yep.
that is the easiest thing to learn how to shift on, right?
Yep.
There is so much play everywhere. It's like you really
Yeah.
can't screw it up. Versus you're now talking
Mm-hmm.
you know, dual stage clutch, 400 horse,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yep.
Not only is it sensitive, that thing revs what, like 99,000 or something like that. Again, it's a Mitsubishi. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. The factory
uh,
rev limiter is, I think, at 7,500.
yeah, there we go.
I currently have mine set to 8,000. And yeah, it's whisper smooth. So I taught my buddy's son to drive stick in my M35 A2, my deuce and a half.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a huge vehicle. However, it's a 485 cubic inch inline six diesel. You can go from first gear to fifth and you're not gonna stall just because of the sheer torque in that thing. So I mean, like it was the perfect vehicle. It was like, yeah, it's like if you oops, you're not going to you're not going to hurt the thing. You're not going to stall it. It's going to say, "Hey, I'm angry," and lug the motor, but you're not going to injure it at all. So, here, learn this, and it is a weird gear pattern. um,
I bet.
so I just had him. It's like, you're gonna do first, second, and third. Don't worry about 4 and 5 because those are flipped backwards because of fitting it inside the transmission case. Very very interesting pattern for the gearbox. I don't understand why they did it, but they had to. Hey, whatever. So yeah, that's he's like, oh, this isn't that bad. I'm like, okay, so all this give, you're not going to have this much give in anything else that you drive. So here, this is what you're going to learn now. Learn to shift it without pressing the clutch in. What? Figure out what the RPMs are and RPM match, and you can shift it without using the
Yep.
clutch. What?
Yep.
This is what people did before synchros.
Yeah, that's how you were
Yeah.
supposed to shift. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
first gear and reverse were not synchronized in that transmission. So I mean, other than that, they were all synchroed. So yes, you had to clutch to get in or out of first, but other than that, like yeah, you can RPM match. It's a thing.
Yeah, that's what you had to do before. But let alone that's just good. If you yeah, it just takes time.
Yeah, it's like if you can learn to do this,
clutch.
if you have a clutch that is failing, you can get home.
And it's not that hard too. Remember where your rev matches, first to second,
Yep.
second to third, third to fourth. Very simple. Match the two numbers up.
Yep.
Yeah, if only more people were that simple. I did something else a couple weeks ago, and my dad said to me, "He's like, yeah, nobody's really thinking like that. I think I bought something, and it was like way cheaper to buy the whole package instead of the replacement stuff. It's like, yeah, I'll just throw away what I did because I bought it cheaper than what it was packaged as the replacement, rather than just buying the whole separate unit. So, yeah. If people knew how to, just simply match it up, it'd be way easier.
Yeah, on the transmission side of things, like, so I mean, an automatic performs better than a person with a manual trans any day. It can shift far faster and hold far more.
But that's not as fun.
It does take, yes, it takes away some of the feel of the car. I completely agree. But if you're talking an 800 horse motor and you're using a dual clutch inside that automatic, I mean, yeah, that's going to be able to shift and get back into the power band so much faster than a person, even with a short throw.
Exactly. Have you done anything onto that? I'm meaning like any resin prints. I know, again, resin is different, structural, and you're waiting for FDM. That's why, but I didn't know if you did anything small, like inside or, clips or something, like Brian, in the trunk.
No, because, well, so I've gotten really lucky, and the few times I've had to take interior panels apart, I haven't broken any of the stupid plastic clips. Because of course the style clip that car uses, when you buy the box of them at the auto part store, it has like 2 of the one that you actually need in it, and they never seem to ever be in stock at the Mitsubishi dealership, which I find ironic. So no, I haven't had to do any prints for it. There's nothing. I mean, I've been considering replacing the shifter knob because the leather top is getting kind of worn, like the gear pattern's completely gone.
Yeah.
And that would actually be a pretty good use case for a resin print because it's not terribly structural. I just haven't yet.
The way you said that, Brian, I know it's like 10:20. I need to start wrapping up. The clips. Remember like a couple years ago when you printed clips on your flagpole and stuff?
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know, is that still holding? Because I know you didn't do it in, you know, PET G and
yeah,
all that.
yeah. No, in fact, yeah, the clips on there, they're probably a year old now. In fact, I printed a half a dozen for a buddy of mine too, because he
Now, out of
wanted
Wow,
some.
that's
curiosity,
funny.
with that being outside, did you like, you know, throw a coat of paint on it to stop the UV
No,
from getting to it? No? Okay.
no, I just
And
printed them on the FDM and
Hmm.
plain PLA. I've tried to,
Okay.
I've, I've beefed up the infill,
Hmm.
just, I probably 40%, I think was the last ones I did,
Hmm.
which really isn't that much, but,
Hmm.
um, yeah, this last set, they've been out there for at least a year.
I thought it's been about a year, and I thought you had replaced one of them because one broken or something.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. One broke during the winter, the one that came with it. And I'm like, oh, I could just make my own, 20 minutes later, I was done and, the flag was back up. And then I made some and they were a little too thick.
Hmm.
So I thinned them out again and I printed a couple of dozen and I got some in a bag in case they break again. And I gave a friend a bunch of them. And yeah, but they work great.
I
Hmm.
find it
That's
amazing
what's
for
nice
being in
when you're,
PLA. You know,
yeah. Yeah, but that's what's nice about these machines. It's like you have a quick need, and it's like, if it's not super complex, it's like, yeah, I can make that.
Hmm.
You don't have to run to the hardware store and hunt and peck and look around to
Yep.
find something. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's definitely a lot cheaper and quicker just to go and spend $2 and buy something. But like with the sun porch, I printed an outlet cover for the wall. And I printed an outlet cover for the ceiling fan because I'm, nowhere near ready to put that stuff, in yet.
Hmm.
So that's like, 10 minutes of design and, an hour of print, I can be done. It's
yeah,
fun
and
to
it's
do that.